Welcome to the Astro Guy podcast. I'm not an expert, I'm an amateur like you. I'm here to learn and here to teach. So let's enjoy the ride together. Carpe Noctem, seize the night.
I'm Wayne Zool, and this is the Astro Guy podcast. It is my pleasure and honor today to have an old friend on the podcast with me. And I'm talking about StarGazer Steve Dodson. Steve and I first met, and I'm going to share a little picture with you. And we first met in 1981 at the Stellafane convention in Vermont, and I was 15 years old. And I brought my telescope up to the convention, and I happened to set up right next to this giant, it looked like a cannon that was going to launch a clown across the observing field. It turned out to be a fantastic telescope that a couple years later, I got to view Halley's Comet through when it was very, very far away. But this was Steve's telescope, and I was set up probably 15, 20 feet away. So we got to talking and chatting, and over the years, a real friendship has developed, and I've become friends with Steve's children. Both his sons and his daughter are very important people in my life, and they're like family to us. So it was all because of this. I don't want to say it's all because of this telescope, but that's a big part of it. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Wayne. One of the pleasures of attending Stellafane most years over the last 40 years is meeting and enjoying the friendship of people like you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's I think I may have to dedicate an entire episode to Stellafane. And talk about some of the history, and maybe I can get Bert Willard to come on and talk about Porter, but that's a different topic. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but I want to first talk a little bit about how you got interested in the hobby of astronomy.
Well, it was one of those chance moments in life that changes the whole course of a lifetime. A grade 2 teacher must have seen some starlight in my eyes and gave me a little booklet about astronomy that had beautiful pictures of things that I ended up observing for the past several decades. And that booklet gave me a feeling, wow, this is so beautiful. I've got to know more about it, and I've got to tell everybody to go and look at this stuff. And that was in grade 2. And a couple of years later, I had saved my allowance up and got a small telescope, a 3.5-inch reflecting telescope. And maybe 4 years after that, I made my own 6-inch telescope, grinding my own mirror. And the guidebook that I was using to know how to do that had many photographs and stories about Stellafane, which is what you see in the background behind me, my eventual 22-inch telescope at Stellafane.
Wow. I'm wondering if that square tube in the background might be the telescope I made. I remember it had a square tube, it was blue, and it was on a pipe mount.
Oh yes. My first telescope ended up on a pipe mount as well. But this telescope behind me with the orange tube is actually a new telescope kit that I've designed to be able to be shipped in a box 28 inches long, wow, and yet be a full focal length f8 telescope. And it can be assembled in a morning, and you can take it out the same night.
And I want to get into that a little more with you. I remember it's got to be 20 years ago, maybe or close to it, when I purchased one of your kits for my kids. And I remember spending a day, it was probably 2 days, putting it together with them, and then bringing it outside and showing them the moon and Jupiter, and they were blown away by it. And that telescope, we still have it. It's in my garage. It's about 10 feet away from me. It doesn't get much use anymore, but it is something that every now and then I will take it out, and it's great for the planets. And I think it was a 4.5-inch f10, something like that.
I did make a 4.5-inch f10 telescope that was very high resolution for its price of $229. But I thought I had sent you a 6-inch f8
You're
telescope.
right. It is a 6-inch. It is a 6-inch now that I think about it.
But you experienced that you can have more joy in looking through a telescope that you've made yourself and sharing it with your family and learning what's in it and how it goes together and how it really works.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the greatest joys. I think that was something that Russell Porter had said, that one of the greatest joys you can have is to look at the heavens through a telescope that you've built with your own hands. So that's really it. So second grade. Now, were you in Canada then, or were you in California?
Well, I left California when I was 3 years old. My father was heading east to a greater opportunity in South Bend, Indiana. That's where I built my 6-inch, my first 6-inch telescope and mirror and everything. And then when I was 13 years old, we moved to Canada, where I am now working.
Oh, wow. Now I have a quick question about your hat. Did somebody name an asteroid for you?
That's right. This very kind gentleman in the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada proposed my name for asteroid number 18322.
Yeah, 13822. Yeah.
13822, and it's named Steve Dodson. Now you can go to a NASA website and see an animation of the asteroid in its orbit, and it chugs around the sun, and a little sign follows it with the name Steve Dodson on it. Now that is the greatest thrill you can have for having an asteroid. It isn't worth anything in monetary value, unless it turns out to be solid kryptonite or something. It may eventually be mine. But the same gentleman who proposed my name for the asteroid got this hat for me, and it commemorates the discovery of that asteroid by the Spacewatch Observatory in Arizona. So this hat is one of my prized possessions.
That's fantastic. I'm glad that I asked you about that, because that really is an amazing honor to have. And I know a few people that have them, and there's, I mean, certainly there's many famous people who asteroids are named for. I just did an episode about Charles Messier, it was the first in a series called The Great Astronomers, and Charles Messier has an asteroid named for him, as do many other people. I know David Levy certainly has at least one, and a lot of other people. I don't know if Porter has one. I know he's got a crater on the moon, but he may or may not have an asteroid. He might. I don't know. So before we get into the things that a beginner should do if you're just starting out in the hobby, do you have a favorite object to look at?
Well, my favorite object that I look at every time I set up my telescope is the entire display of the Milky Way galaxy, the glowing band of the Milky Way stretching across the sky with bright patches and dark areas, and studded with star clusters, nebulae, and that is the greatest reward every night before I zoom into specific objects that might be in the Milky Way, looking at the whole thing, getting a sense of where we fit in our home galaxy.
It must be nice to have to be able to go outside your house and see that every night.
Well, 30 years ago, my backyard would show the Milky Way. Now I think I have to drive for half an hour to get out of town to see the Milky Way.
When we first moved, and I'm only about 17 miles from New York City, but when we first moved here, I remember that summer being able to faintly see the Milky Way, but not anymore. But I've been able to. I mean, the picture behind me I took from my front yard. So,
Wow.
But that's more about technology and filters than the sky.
Yes, that's great.
So, and the Milky Way, you're right. To look at that, and to know what it is, and to have an understanding of what you're looking at, that it's our galaxy that we're looking at, and that you can see it in the summer and in the winter. You're looking at different directions at it. It's it's really mind blowing. I find it, to be just, it's humbling for sure. But it is a beautiful sight. And when you're in a dark sky in the summer, the Milky Way is just one of the most beautiful things you can see. Now, the next question is kind of a little, I don't know. You may have it might be a silly answer. It might not. But do you have a favorite telescope or a piece of gear that you use?
Well, I think you can see two of them in the background behind me, each in a very different way. The 22-inch telescope was, for 3 years after I met you in 1981, 82, and 83, was the biggest telescope at Stellafane ever. And it's big enough that you could look at the Trifid Nebula and see that there was a blue part and a red part. And I found that absolutely stunning. I made that observation at Stellafane. So this instrument was unique. It was like an observatory in itself. But the other one is the 4.5-inch telescope you can see behind me. It represents my philosophy that you have experienced for yourself, that by building your own telescope and not getting hung up on things that take months to do, you gain an experience of connecting with the universe through something that you yourself have made, just like Porter said. And so they are both my favorites in different ways.
And is the 22-inch, do you still have that?
I have the tube. It's in my garage, and it's not doing anything right now. The mirror I sold back to John Dobson, and he made another telescope with it. And the mounting, I just ran out of space to park this 16-foot long trailer, and it's kind of in permanent cold storage.
It's where you are, it's not permanently cold, but
well, we have hot summers, and I've been thinking about those lately.
I'm sure
it's been mighty cold, and I'm sure just single-digit numbers in the Fahrenheit scale.
Yeah, we've had some very cold days and evenings here as well, and I was happy today that it hit 34 degrees Fahrenheit. So some of the snow that's out there is melting. Not that we have very much, but I'm happy to see that. I don't like the cold. I'm much happier warmer weather. In the spring and the fall are really my favorite times of year.
Patrick and I dress up warmly and go snowshoeing on some of these, when it's not the coldest day, but there's still lots of snow up here.
Yeah, I enjoy following those adventures. I know Patrick posts that stuff on Facebook, and I always get a kick out of seeing that. It's great to see that from you guys. So I really want to get into the meat of this, which is beginners. You're starting out. One of the reasons I started doing the podcast was to help people starting out, because it's really daunting, and especially today. I think that, for the last couple of years, with the pandemic, that people needed an outlet, and all of a sudden, amateur astronomy, became a hobby for a lot of people. The hobby's grown, and astrophotography has grown as well because the technology. But it can be a very expensive hobby. And I certainly have spent a lot of money over the years on equipment. But I've also gone the alternate route and made my own optics, and built my own telescopes as well. And there's you can have great success with both. And I know you and I both know some really incredible telescope makers that, well, they don't do it on the cheap either. And I'm thinking someone like Dave Kelly, who puts or Phil Roundsville, that put together these spectacular telescopes. But there's a lot of money invested in materials. But let's talk a little bit about. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're doing? I know you have a company that you've had for years, StarGazer Steve. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and some of your products, and then we'll just take it from there.
Well, most important thing I wanted to say is that there are probably more ways to get started in astronomy than there are people on the planet. And you can do it. There's certainly an opportunity to spend money and acquire technologies and so on. But I'm advocating keeping it very simple. You don't need any gear to get started. That can come later. And all of advanced aspects of astronomy can be done by amateur astronomers once they've had a basic experience of the sky and the universe. You shouldn't be concerned about gear and technology until you have a feeling for connecting with the sky and the contents of the sky that tell us about the universe. So the only thing I suggest you need at the beginning is an attitude of being a sky watcher, or the attitude of an observer. So you can start by observing your response, the response of your eyes to the night sky when you go out during twilight and later. Your eyes adapt to the dark, and you can experience that things that you couldn't see at first become visible as the pupils of your eye enlarge and the retina becomes more sensitive to light. And then you can experience the sky and the universe without a lot of prior knowledge and equipment. So don't focus on the instrumentation, the telescopes, and the technology too soon, because that can result in you having an experience of instruments and an experience of technology, when what we want is an experience of the universe mediated by a beautiful sky. So the first thing you can do, action you can take tonight, if it's clear, and it looks like it's going to be clear here, for instance, go out in twilight and see what is visible. See what you can see. Is there a moon in the sky? How does the sky change as the twilight deepens? Go out later in the evening and see what you can see in the sky. Get used to the appearance of the sky and the objects in it as you develop the attitude of an observer. Look and see if the moon is in the sky. What's the shape of the moon? Follow the moon from day to day, from night to night. Get used to its rhythms. When it grows from a crescent to a full moon, it gets brighter and brighter. You can see the moon in daytime. See if you can find the moon in the afternoon before the full moon comes, or in the morning after the full moon. Watch the stars for 15 minutes. You will see stars rising in the east, getting higher in the east, setting in the west. And if you look in the north, you'll see the stars are not setting. They're going around in a giant circle, like the hour hand of a clock. Only it's going to be a bit slower than half the speed of the hour hand of a clock. Now, notice the patterns of stars. They don't have to be official constellations. You can give your own names to groups of stars, but the idea is to notice there are patterns which are the same from night to night, from week to week, and you'll notice that there are some of those patterns that actually change. And if you have a pattern that changes because one star in that pattern moved from night to night, or from week to week, or month to month, that's because you picked a pattern, you picked a group of stars that included a planet. The planets are wandering stars, and you don't have to be told that light is Jupiter and that light is Saturn or Venus, because you can see the pattern changing as the planets move through the patterns of stars. The sky changes like a kaleidoscope. You'll know some stars because they're so much part of our culture that you almost don't even have to have it pointed out to you, like the Big Dipper. And as you see there are patterns which are more or less have their place in the sky, you'll notice that from week to week, they shift towards the west. A star which rises at 7 p.m. tonight is going to rise at 6:58 tomorrow night, and 6:54 the next night, and a week later, it'll rise half an hour earlier, and a month later, it rises 2 hours earlier. So as that happens, the stars are also shifting towards the west. Those in the west are getting lower. They'll eventually end their season of visibility and disappear, but they come back the next year, like an old friend that comes back year after year. So certain patterns of stars that you like, if they disappear in the west after a few months, don't worry, they'll be back at the same time next year. So there's a lot you can see if you just go out and look. But when you want to know what you're seeing, then I think it's time to go to the newsstand and get Astronomy magazine or Sky and Telescope magazine. Or in northern states, I think, and Canada, you can get Sky News magazine. These magazines help you figure out what you're seeing. They tell you what planets you might have been noticing and what events you might enjoy seeing during the month of the issue. A magazine will also suggest sites that might be visible in your binoculars. We'll talk about binoculars in a moment. There are star charts in these magazines, generally in the center. This chart covers the whole sky that can be seen in a given month, in this case, February. So in the magazines, you'll find these circular charts, and there are also star finders, rotating star finders that do the same sort of thing. Instead of having a circle like in the magazine, these generally have an oval, which shows you the horizon around all the stars that are up at a given time. But this one is good for a whole year because there are months showing all around the outside: January, February, March, and so on. And if I want to know what stars are up today or tonight, I'll come to my month. For instance, January. We're in the middle of January as I speak. And I'll put the time that I'm observing, say 8 p.m., middle of the evening, middle of January, line up the time with the date. And these are the stars that are up right now. But to use it, I need to know what part of the sky I'm looking at any given time. And the directions south, north, east, and west are written on the chart. And if I want to focus on the stars that are in the south, I've set the time of the evening with the date, and the word south is there. I put south at the bottom, and this part of the sky is what I'm looking towards as I face south. And similarly, if I want to see what's rising in the east, then I put east at the bottom, and there are the stars rising in the east. So star charts can be round or oval, and
that's called a planisphere, what you were just demonstrating.
This star finder is technically known as a planisphere. And there are many sources for them. Science gift stores, for instance, and they are featured in the magazines that I've shown. But if you want to know what to look for in tonight's sky, is there something special in the sky tonight that might not be there tomorrow night or a week from now? Well, I put out sky alerts to tell you what to look for tonight. And I will send the alert out hours before any event that's widely observable and of great interest. And I put these alerts on websites and Twitter. The websites are SudburyAstronomyClub.com. Our local club website carries these alerts. And the other one is my website, StarGazerSteve.com. I also do this on Twitter at StarGazerSteveD, and you have to put the D at the end. Otherwise, you're going to get this somebody who calls him Stargazer Steve the astrologer. And we are not looking to tell our future.
No, we're looking to see the past.
Yes, we are. And the bigger we make our telescopes, the farther in the past we see, until we get to the James Webb Space Telescope that we'll be seeing back to millions of years before after the beginning of it all.
So that's and your alerts are great. I know on Twitter, I follow you on Twitter, so I do get the updates. And it's interesting because I know I have friends that rely on me, and I certainly put them out there on Facebook and other sources as well. But your updates are fantastic. So go ahead. Go ahead. Keep coming.
You, of course, I told you that your eyes are dark adapted, and I told you that you might want to use star charts, either a planisphere or the round star chart in the magazines. But there's something missing there, because you're not going to be able to see your star chart if you're at a dark site, and the your eyes are dark adapted, you have to be able to see your chart without spoiling the dark adaptation of your eyes. If you use a regular white light to see your chart or your magazine, you'll see it all right, but then you won't see the stars afterwards. They'll disappear because you just spoiled your dark adaptation. And
you're
that's
certainly going to
why,
anger anybody who's out there with you.
that's right. That's why we use red lights. This gives a funny effect. But I assure you, I am showing a red light here. And this was obtained from Amazon, red LEDs. You should note that this light is bright enough that you can shine it on the ground. If you're walking around in the dark, you can shine it on the ground. There's enough light so you won't step into a hole or something. But you have to be very careful with these bright LEDs not to shine them right in somebody's eyes. Because if you shine that directly in somebody's face or eyes, even though it's red, which doesn't affect your vision as much, it's still so bright it will affect, it'll destroy your night vision. Now that's particularly important because there are these so-called headlights that mount on your head. And if you look at somebody, see the vision go away? If you're wearing one of these lights, you're bending down, shining the light on your charts or something that you're adjusting on your telescope, that's fine. But if you then look straight at somebody else, the headlight is going to spoil that person's night vision. And if they're a serious astronomer, they will not thank you.
It's funny you say that, Steve. I just notice I'm wearing a headlamp now, and I have 3 different headlamps, and these are great. I love them when I'm out imaging or observing because it's hands-free, but they are very bright. And when I would do serious deep sky observing, for example, I would actually take a flashlight and I would paint the front of it black, and then I would just lightly scratch it with sandpaper, and it had a red LED in it, so it really dimmed that red down, so it wasn't very bright. But for setup and tear down, these headlamps are great, and they're great in the field, and they're inexpensive.
Well, that's a good demonstration and a very good technique to avoid messing with people's night vision. Regardless of what kind of light you have, it's best not to shine it directly at anybody. This is called Star Party etiquette. By the way, star parties, which cellophane behind me is one, of course, are a great way to learn about telescopes and astronomy without investing a lot of time and money. You can look through different telescopes, see what you like about telescopes, see what looks to be the best for you to invest in eventually. But before you get serious about telescopes, you will know a lot about them from attending star parties, and your local star party will sometimes be spotlighted in one of the magazines, so you can go have a look. But start with binoculars, and don't get giant binoculars. Small, lightweight binoculars like these 7x35 binoculars are much easier to use. You can hold them steadily, where with the more powerful binoculars, every little shake jerks the stars around, so you can't see very well. And besides, if you have specialized astronomy binoculars, they're only good at night, whereas this kind, 7x35, 7 power, 35 millimeter lenses, is great for bird watching, in case you need a change of hobbies temporarily.
You know, a lot of times people will always, it's one of the questions I get the most is, you know, somebody in my family is interested in astronomy. What telescope should I get them? And I always tell them, get binoculars. I said, go on Amazon. You don't have to spend a lot of money. And I'm not plugging Amazon, but you know, go somewhere to a department store. You can spend $20 or $25 and get a nice pair of binoculars that will open the world, open the sky up to you, and really you'll be able to see way more than you could see without them.
Yes, I do that too. I always recommend binoculars. I'd rather have somebody buy a telescope from me later because they've been enjoying the sky with binoculars and learning where the neat stuff is that they can explore later on with a telescope. This time you spend just getting familiar with the sky and looking at things in the sky in a simple way and using star charts and so on makes your enjoyment of telescopes all the much greater when you get when the time is right to get a telescope. And I should point out that I love these kind of planispheres where you dial in the time and the date. You can do this with the computer. There are great programs like Stellarium that will show you all the stars that are up and a lot more that you can only see with a telescope. But computers have power cords. Your cell phones have batteries. This doesn't need batteries or a power cord, and it gives the right answer all the time. But
I was just going to say, Steve, I'm going to plug there's a website out there called inthesky.org where you can make your own planisphere. And I'm just going to share that real quick. What's kind of cool about it is a planisphere will be different depending on your latitude. So I live really I'm almost 41 degrees north in New Jersey, but they break it down in 5-degree increments, at least in the lower latitudes. And then as you get higher, you notice there's a 52 here, but everything else is in 5s, it looks like. So I guess that maybe the people who created this live at 52 degrees north or 52 degrees south. But you can put in they have 52 degrees north and 52 degrees south in here. But whatever your latitude is, pick the nearest 5 and you can pick this out, and then you can print it out and with a pair of scissors. And that's really all you need is paper, scissors, and a button clip in the middle to hold it. And it's really simple to do.
That's a very good idea. You'll really know, again, the idea that if you built it, you know how it works.
And you know, you mentioned Stellarium, which is a wonderful program that I use often. If you know, people who view my podcast on YouTube, when I do my monthly "What's Up in the Sky This Month" podcast, a lot of the images of what you're going to see in the sky come from Stellarium, not the actual images of the objects, but where they are in the sky and the constellations and things. Stellarium's phenomenal, and there's a lot of apps that people can use on their phone that are free and easy to use, but you don't want to get bogged down in that, and you don't want to be, especially once you're dark adapted, you don't want to be on the computer or the phone to try to see what's what. You really need that chart in front of you as a hard copy so you don't ruin your night vision.
That's right. Your phone can blind you if you're looking for faint objects in the sky.
Now, you're with your company, with StarGazer, Steve, telescopes. Tell me a little bit about what products you're offering now.
Well, my main product right now is the 4.5-inch telescope you see in the back. I've made 6-inch and even 10-inch telescopes that I offered in the past. But I'm finding shipping is getting very expensive. So I decided to go back to the 4 1/4 inch, 4.5 inch format. And because of the way you have a tube that slides into a box, that's the way John Dobson did it in the beginning with his huge Dobsonian telescopes. But it also gives you a way to make the shipping container a lot shorter than the telescope that you see behind me. So that's my main product right now. And I from time to time, I also make 4.5 inch telescopes mounted on a tripod that are not a kit, but a ready-made telescope that you can take out and enjoy right out of the box.
I think the kits are just great for people because they are easy to do. You can do them in the morning, and they're just, you know, you do have that satisfaction. What do the kits go for today?
It's approximately $200, but with the supply chain problems that we've been having and so on, I'm hedging a bit on the price. It may be under, it may be a little more, but I'm trying to keep it at about $200.
And if anybody's interested in that, it's stargazersteve.com. And like I said, I have one of the older ones that has been in my family now for about 20 years. And it's a terrific, optically, it's a great scope. It's a really great little telescope. And like I said, I have the 6-inch one, but the 4.5, I know I've done a lot of work recently with library telescopes, which are commercially made and then modified. And we've been doing that. I know there's if check with your library, your local library, and see if they have a telescope you can borrow. And that's the library telescope program. It's a very small, it's a 4.5 inch, very portable tabletop telescope that's made by Orion and then modified by whatever group puts it out there.
And many astronomy clubs have telescopes they loan out too. So if you can find out how to contact your local astronomy club, that might be an option.
And that's, in my opinion, one of the best resources out there, especially when you're just starting out in the hobby, is to find a local astronomy club, because you're going to find people that want to help you, that have more knowledge than you, and some may and some may not. But either way, you're going to learn. And in many cases, they have an observatory or a dark sky site that as a member you're allowed to go to and enjoy and use. And, you know, I mean, I know here in New Jersey, there's a lot of clubs. For such a small state, we have a lot of astronomy clubs. And we actually have a beautiful dark sky site up at Jenny Jump State Forest, which is it's just under an hour, I think, from where I live. And it's there's I think 9, there's a bunch of observatories, a bunch of roll-off roof observatories, and there's a 16-inch telescope, and there's a couple of C14s and some other scopes there, and they do great public outreach. The only difficulty is because it's on the top of a mountain, it's really difficult to get up there in the winter months on the dirt road. When they get icy, it's treacherous. So pretty much from December through the spring, there's not much going on there. But you know, your local clubs, you know, you can just Google local astronomy club and you'll be shocked at what comes up. There's people out there, libraries, a lot of schools have them, museums, they're all over. And it's just one of the best resources that you can do, especially when you're first starting out in the hobby.
I was thinking, if you do get to a star party with your local astronomy club, and you see a lot of different kinds of telescopes, if you're attracted to a particular telescope that you see and you think it might be for you, try to find out what's involved in setting up that telescope. Well, getting it to the site, first of all. Will you need to get a bigger car if you bought this telescope? Or are there a lot of fine adjustments the person has to do with setting it up and taking it down too, and ask if that person would let you try to aim the telescope at something. Then you'll find out how easy it is to operate the telescope and find things with it.
It's funny what you say is very true, and a lot of times people, they see these go-to telescopes, and in my opinion, they're hobby killers for a lot of people, because out of the box, they're not simple to use. Once you know what you're doing and you know your way around the sky and you have some experience, then it becomes a lot easier to use them, and they can be quick and easy. And I've had a couple of go-to scopes. My current rig that I use is a go-to rig, but there's nothing like setting up a Dobsonian where there's no setting circles, there's no electronics, there's no motors. It's just a couple of bearings, a couple of mirrors, and an eyepiece. And the scope behind Steve, the Dobson, and he mentioned John Dobson a couple of times. The Dobsonian was invented by John Dobson. He never made money off of it. John passed a few years ago. He was a terrific guy, a really interesting man. It turns out, Steve, I don't know if you know this, but my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, is John Dobson's cousin.
No, that's
incredible. She knew him. She had first met him in the 60s, and her first name is Lowry, which is John's middle name.
Yes.
And it's a family name. So that's kind of a cool, because I had the privilege of spending a bit of time with John when he would come to Stellafane. One year I was his driver, and I got to spend an awful lot of time with him. And in fact, he taught my son how to use chopsticks.
Yes.
He was a character, that's for sure.
That's amazing.
So for people that are really just starting out, what else do you recommend for them? Obviously binoculars. We mentioned planispheres, binoculars, and going to clubs and star parties. Is there something else they should be doing?
Well, my starting point, just watching the sky and staying in touch with where the moon and planets are going, and developing a connection with the universe by being out under the sky at night. And the central thing is the experience of the connection with the starry universe and the planets, and being an observer gives you a background that allows you to get into the technological aspects afterwards and not get lost in the technology, because you got the experience of the direct connection. And plunging into the technology without that experience will give you an experience of technology, but maybe not the experience that we want.
You're 100% right on that. It's it's I don't want to say it's tactile. It's tactile with your eyes and tactile with your heart when you're out there. But it's mind-boggling to know what you're looking at, and to see, and to just to learn the skies and learn the constellations. It is life-changing. And as you learn about the different objects, and knowing what's up in the sky and what events are happening. And Steve gave some great sources, and of course I want this podcast to be a source of that as well. So every month I do my What's Up in the Sky this month podcast. But, I'm one of many that are out there. And, there's so many resources available. All you need to do is look. And with this hobby, all you need to do is look. That's the best place to start.
We got a great event coming up at the end of this month, the end of January 2022. In the early morning, just as twilight is starting to develop, you have a crescent moon, Mars, and Venus all together.
Yeah. They're going to be lined up beautifully in the morning. I think it's a 14% lit crescent on the 29th. This podcast will be, well, anybody who's watching live will know that. But this is being recorded before that, and this is going to come out on YouTube and on all the major podcast platforms probably in about 2 weeks. But the so you bring up a good point about what's coming up in the future, and what are your plans going forward, assuming that we resume some sort of normalcy in our lives, and we can travel and do things and be safe and healthy?
Well, I'm looking forward to a normal season of what we call summer star parties, like Stellafane, and we have a bunch of them in Northern Ontario, and Southern Ontario has Starfest, and there are many. The magazines will advise you when there's one in your area. I'm looking forward to that. By the way, the moon and planets that we get to see at the end of January, if we missed it, something similar is happening towards the end of February, because the moon will be new again. We'll have a thin waning crescent moon in the morning twilight at the end of February as well.
We have a great one coming up in June where all the naked eye planets and the moon are all going to be visible in a straight line.
Wow, it's a kaleidoscope. It's always changing. In November, December, towards the end of 2021, we had a stunning lineup of Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus all lined up. Jupiter high in the south, and Saturn to its right, and then down near the horizon we had Venus. And Venus has already passed between the sun and Earth and shot into the morning sky. I saw it this morning. Saturn is hidden in the glare of the sunset, and Jupiter is very low in the evening sky. And that's how much things change.
Yeah, the beginning of February, I think Jupiter sets. You've got about an hour and a half of observing time on Jupiter, and then it's gone. And by the middle of the month, it's gone, and it gets lost in the twilight until I think mid-April or early April, before it reemerges from the twilight. And I know for me, Jupiter is my favorite planet to actually look at through a telescope. I know most people it's Saturn, but Jupiter changes so much in such a short period of time. You can watch. I know I can probably pop a video in here. I've done some little animations showing just 40 minutes of motion on Jupiter, and it's amazing what you can see in a short time frame.
It is wonderful and colorful.
Yes.
People use color filters to isolate different parts of a planet's atmosphere, but Jupiter is so beautiful in natural color that I can't bear to use filters.
Jupiter's really one of my favorites.
Well, Jupiter is the planet that is huge compared to Earth, 11 times Earth's diameter and 300 times the Earth's mass. And it's made it's referred to as a gas giant. Hydrogen and helium gas and a bit of methane, ammonia, and trace compounds. It sounds very gassy, and yet it's 300 times more massive than the Earth. And all of that mass is in motion, with the equatorial belts showing us regions that are experiencing different winds from their surrounding areas. And it's winds of hundreds of kilometers per hour.
So this is a picture I took on September 19th of Jupiter, and it's made from a video. It was probably 20,000 frames of video, and I probably stacked the best 10 or 15%. But this was actually, I think, the next night, and you notice it's totally different. The seeing was different. You know, we're looking at the other side of the planet here because Jupiter makes one full rotation in about 10 hours or just under 10 hours. So, you know, one day you may be looking at the red spot, which has shrunk. You know, it used to be about 3 times the size of the Earth, and now it's a little over one time the size of the Earth.
That's a wonderful image, Wayne.
Thank you.
Incredibly detailed. And it takes years of experience to, and then potentially hours sitting at your computer, combining those frames to get the resolution.
That's a whole process that a lot of people are getting into the hobby because of astrophotography, because the technology has made it to take an image like that. I know 20 years ago, it wasn't conceivable that an amateur could take an image like that. Those are like what we got back from the Voyager probes. You know, but with technology today, CMOS technology and computer technology, we're able to do a lot of that stuff. But it's not, in my opinion at least, it's not the place to start in the hobby. You know, you have to learn your way around the sky and learn the sky. That's the best way, in my opinion, at least, to get that going. I want you to know, Steve, I'm wearing this shirt today in honor of you. It's a Canadian band and
yeah,
one of my favorites. So that's my little homage to Canada.
Very nice.
So I want to thank you, Steve, for coming out and spending the time today. I'm going to put your information back up on the screen. Let me just share that one more time. So I want to urge you, if you want to know what's out there in the sky, Steve does the sky alerts, SudburyAstronomyClub.com, StarGazerSteve.com, and on Twitter at StarGazerSteveD. And make sure you don't forget the D on the end, because you don't want your horoscope. You want to know what's going on in the sky. And if you're interested in building your own telescope, you want to get a great kit to build. His kits are phenomenal. The optics are really good, especially for the cost. I mean, the value that you offer is just fantastic. So, I wanted to put this slide up again so people can see it, the ones that are watching. Obviously, the ones that are listening to it, it will be in the show notes. So the information's there. You don't have to get a pen out and write it down. But again, Steve, I want to thank you for taking the time. One more time, to get StarGazer Steve Sky Alerts, remember to visit SudburyAstronomy.com and StarGazerSteve.com. And you can also get his updates on Twitter at StarGazerSteveD. So that's all for this episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I hope you found our time together to be fun and helpful. If you have questions or episode suggestions, you can always email us at astroguypodcast@gmail.com, or leave a text message or a voicemail at 973-404-0380. And if you're not a member, please join the Astro Guy Podcast group on Facebook. You can also visit our YouTube channel, the Astro Guy Podcast, for past episodes and other surprises. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And again, thank you to Steve. May your skies be clear. And as always, Carpe Noctem, seize the night.
I'm Wayne Zool, and this was the Astro Guy Podcast. Thank you for listening. As always, your questions, comments, and suggestions are welcome. Keep wondering. Keep your eyes on the sky. Have fun. Carpe Noctem. Seize the night.